G'day and welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Before we get into today's video, please take note that this is mature content. Although nothing explicit is shown, it is not intended for viewers below the age of 18. Now, what is ERP? ERP is an enterprise resource planning system, and it's used by accountants worldwide to manage their businesses and ledgers for their businesses. The ERP we're going to be talking about is Erotic Roleplay. Erotic Roleplay has existed in many forms across numerous forms of media and social interaction, and it's something that exists pretty much worldwide in numerous ways. In MMOs, it's pretty much apparent or exists to some degree in every MMO, from Guild Wars to EverQuest to World of Warcraft, hell, even to brand new MMOs or even other RTS MMOs like Diablo. Erotic Roleplay is something that exists in large in the community, but especially exists in World of Warcraft in the roleplay servers. Roleplay servers already engender a kind of resonance between characters and their in-game characters, and causes players to tend to want to experience some of the more mature thrills of adult life. Now, of course, ERP as a community exists in every single game pretty much, but in World of Warcraft I would say it definitely strongly exists in the RP servers, and the hub of a lot of ERP through various means and degrees is Goldshire. Now, ERP can be anything ranging from a full-on roleplay that turns into some romantic intentions to being just a debaucherous one-night stand where you don't even care about the World of Warcraft characters involved. There's a large scale of degrees to it, and so measuring its impact in its community is a little bit difficult. But generally speaking, we want to discuss kind of the various forms and ways in which it takes place within the WoW community. So firstly, let's talk about why. So it can be very blatant. It can be whether it's erotically role-playing with a character that you deem attractive within the game, or it can be to live out some of your fantasies from things like epic different demon forms, or even if you want to hang out with a Draenei Sailor Moon. There's various kinks and eroticisms that players can engage in within World of Warcraft that they can't engage with in real life. I think it's also important to point out that a lot of players and people in general probably enjoy the shielded lifestyle of World of Warcraft, whereby you're able to engage in some of these acts or some of these kinks without necessarily showing your real face or your real self. You could be a completely different person or engage in things you would never engage with in a real life setting within the confines of the game quite safely. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, as you can see, Goldshire, at least on my RP server, is definitely a hub for all of this interaction. But how does this interaction take place? Well, a lot of it is private. You may see some open role-playing of some degree, but a lot of it is tame. Drinking, dancing, calling for more ale. A lot of the times you will have to really get into the DMs, so to say, of characters to really engage in these acts, and realistically it doesn't take too long. It can range from simply trading 2 gold pieces to often, most times, just saying DTF. A lot of the times though, roleplay, or at least the roleplay elements, will depend on player to player, and most players will let you know in profiles. Now you might say, well, what profiles are these on World of Warcraft? These are basically tied to a lot of add-ons that players will add in for role-playing that also kind of mix and match into the ERP scene. So a great example is TRP3, which is an add-on that a lot of players will use for role-playing, is an add-on you'll often see used for profiles. And characters will advertise OOC or out-of-character services, as well as ICC or in-character options as well. A lot of the times when scanning players and when scanning people within the settings of Goldshire or just across any server or any world, a lot of the times there'll be indication towards the limits and the kind of interactions they're willing to entertain, which gives you some kind of idea of how to approach them in game, whether that be that they prefer OOC or in-character confrontation. Something super important as well to also understand is there is an element of degrees of I don't want to say degradation, but degrees of interaction between players. Sometimes it can be limited to in-game only, sometimes it very often can go out of game, and very often than not it can involve the exchange of in-game currency as well as in real life money. Pay pigs are a very common existence within the realm of World of Warcraft, and you will often find that a lot of profiles advertise the goods and basically funds that have been given to them by other players within the game. Now, ERP, obviously, in-game can be quite limited. The majority of it is actually relative to text. Most players will DM each other text and interactions and emotes that are private and shared between the two players, but there are a couple emotes that will become quite popular, a lot of them being dance, undressing your character, certain emotes like crouching at certain angles, sitting at certain angles, sleeping or lying down on beds at certain angles, and just in general any kind of interaction between players at separate heights or locations that could kind of cause, I guess, any kind of interesting positioning to occur, basically is entertained. Now, I do have a conversation that I had with a character here, and this person was very kind to answer some questions for me, but I also don't really want to advertise their name so much, because obviously for their own confidentiality as well. But you can see from here, and I'm going to run through this kind of interview that we did here, but basically I wanted to know, is the main reason that they dance at Gold Shy for the gold, or is it for the entertainment? And they say here quite explicitly, it's kind of their kink to be involved in game, and I think this is the case for a lot of people. I don't think a lot of people explicitly go for the gold. I think a lot of people, intentionally go for the interaction or the kink of, being like involved and being kind of interacting with players and this erotic factor to it. It's not just a gold making scheme. I think that is a case. It is a nice side hustle, but I think a lot of the times players are doing it for the excitement that it brings them. So basically, kind of wanted to continue a little bit. They kind of use some explicit language there to say that it lets them to live to be a separate kind of person to what they would have in real life. They're kind of a good girl in real life, and in this situation they want to be a little bit more adventurous, I guess. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Of course, from there, do they still play the game? It's an interesting factor. A lot of role players actually don't explicitly play the game that much. So I've noticed this as a trend for the people I've discussed and interviewed, but a lot of the ERP players don't explicitly play the game. They don't run Mythic Pluses, they don't run raids. They do a little bit every now and then, maybe at the beginning of the season or for certain bits and bobs. But a lot of the time, a lot of their active play time, I guess in inverted commas, is spent in-game. It's spent in-game, in Goldshire, or in roleplay situations, hanging out with other players, and obviously engaging in whatever they want to engage in. But a lot of the time is actually spent essentially playing the roleplay aspect. So they don't necessarily get too hyper involved in the situation or in the scenario of being, an actual Mythic Plus or a raiding player or even PvP. They tend to play the game super casually and actually kind of hardcore involve themselves in the hardcore scene, which is, interesting. It's like almost that their primary reason for playing or involving themselves with the game is this ERP factor. It's this engagement with other players. So I do think it's important to kind of accept that for a lot of players, this is the primary function of World of Warcraft. This community and these interactions are actually what they enjoy the most about the game. And I think that's a very large telling sign towards how they themselves view the game, but also their character within the game. I then asked if anything had ever spilled over, into a real-life situation. They stated that yes, they've exchanged even pictures for in-game gold, but they've also have limited it to a certain extent, obviously to avoid interactions with their real life and relationships. And I think, again, this is probably a case you'll find isn't singular. I think for a lot of players, you get the sense of detachment from yourself by engaging within game. And I think it can become commonplace where players can not necessarily, I want to say, sell themselves, but it desensitizes you, or maybe that's not the right choice of words, but it creates this barrier between yourself and your real life self, so that some more interactions or some further spilling over into the IRL world can be kind of permitted. At the same time, I also think you'll probably find it's a 50-50 situation, whereby this can occur for maybe half of the ERP community, but then you probably find the other half are incredibly guarded about their IRL situation and involving any form of their IRL life. And I think this will be on a person-to-person basis, but I think it's definitely more of a hard yes, hard no situation, where you'll find people that are more than willing to engage in it, and then you'll find people that are 100% against it, and you'll very rarely find someone that's in between. And then, of course, I asked about the community, and I think the community, you know, as much as people may not agree with having this kind of community, they may not want this within their game, I think it's important that people understand that it is a community, and it's a community that's going to always exist in MMOs. You know, I think it's not something that's ever going to go away. It's existed in every single MMO, and World of Warcraft is just an example of it. Final Fantasy, I mean, let's not even go down that road. But these games will always have these communities, and I think it's important to understand that they are not inherently bad people, because or bad people at all for engaging within this kind of gameplay. Is it necessarily what the game was intended for? No, I don't think so. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, you know, as long as it is kept private and out of the way of people who are wanting to primarily engage within the game, I think it's okay, at least from my point of view. You know, that's ultimately my take on it. And I think you'll find that that is the case. It is generally quite private. I do think you have to seek out this interaction. So just to give my final thoughts on this, because I do think it's a very large component, at least of roleplay servers, but it's an undercurrent within every World of Warcraft server and game. I think it's important to understand you do have to choose to go join this community. I don't think it's a community that advertises itself. I don't think it puts itself in the way of other players. I definitely found that it's a community whereby it is something that you have to actively seek to be a part of. So I think that's good, and I think as long as it stays that way, I think it's something that's not something that should be an issue for players. If it's not something you have to actively go to, and it's also not something that is inherently, you know, invasive of anyone's privacy, I think it's fine. I think you are always going to find instances where things go too far, as it does with anything. You know, people racially abusing other people within a raid or something like that is where the game goes too far. In the same way, this kind of community can tend to lead itself to a lot of bad situations, and I think people can get emotionally hurt. I think anytime you are engaging in these kind of interactions with other people, there's always a level of emotional attachment involved, and I think it can lead to a lot of players getting hurt, getting involved, and finding themselves in a bad situation. With that being said, I think it's important to understand that ultimately it is a community within World of Warcraft, and I think for a lot of players it's their primary way of playing this game. Is it a small community? Yes. Is it a active and vibrant community? It's definitely active. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, what I've discovered kind of chatting to people and looking into this community is that it is something that people enjoy, and it's a large component of the game. But I'd love to know what you guys think basically about this, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Do you think it should exist or not? That's it from me. See you guys next time.